I straightened my navy dress and approached the elegant check-in table at the Four Seasons Boston, confidence masking the nervous flutter in my stomach. The woman behind the table smiled politely as I gave her my name. Allison Crawford. Her fingers scrolled down the tablet screen once, then twice. The smile faltered. I'm sorry. I don't see that name on our list. Crawford, I repeated, heat rising to my cheeks. I'm Jessica's sister. The attendant exchanged an uncomfortable glance with her colleague. Around me, wedding guests streamed past in their elegant attire, programs in hand, chatting excitedly about the ceremony. I stood frozen as the reality began to sink in. "One moment, please," the woman said, stepping aside to make a phone call. That's when I spotted my mother approaching from inside the reception area, her expression shifting from surprise to something harder, more familiar. "Allison, what are you doing here?" The question hit like a physical blow. "It's Jessica's wedding, Mom." "Did you really think you were invited?" Her voice carried that old dismissive tone I knew so well. "Strangers aren't allowed." I looked into her eyes, the same green eyes I'd inherited, and saw nothing but cold calculation. No warmth, no recognition of the shared history between us. In that moment, something inside me shifted permanently. "Then I'll live like a stranger," I said quietly, and walked away. But this story doesn't begin at that reception table. It begins 18 years earlier, with another moment of rejection that would define the rest of our family's trajectory. I was 8, sitting at our kitchen table with math homework spread before me, when Dad walked in wearing an expression I'd never seen before. Jessica, 10 and already serious beyond her years, sat across from me, practicing her cursive. "Girls, I need to talk to you both." His voice sounded different, hollow, like it was coming from far away. Jessica immediately grabbed my hand under the table, her fingers cold but steady. It was the last time she would truly protect me. "Your mom and we're not happy anymore. I'm going to be moving out." I started crying immediately, ugly sobs that made my whole body shake. But Jessica sat stone-faced, her grip on my hand tightening until it hurt. "Will we still see you?" I managed between hiccups. "Of course, sweetheart. This doesn't change how much I love you both." But when Dad hugged us goodbye, Jessica pulled away first. I clung to him until Mom gently pried my arms loose, her own eyes red-rimmed but determined. "Come on, girls. We need to be strong now." The word "we" would soon prove selective. Mom changed after Dad left. The warm, patient woman who used to braid my hair and read us bedtime stories disappeared, replaced by someone brittle and watchful. She began treating Jessica less like a daughter and more like a confidant. "You're the only one who understands," she'd tell Jessica while I played alone in our shared bedroom. "You're so much like me." I was apparently too much like Dad, impulsive, creative, emotional. The first time I noticed the favoritism was at Jessica's 11th birthday. Mom presented her with a delicate silver necklace, calling her my mature little woman. 3 months later, at my 9th birthday, I unwrapped socks and school supplies. "We need to be practical now," Mom explained when she saw my face. Jessica wore that necklace every day. By middle school, Jessica had fully transformed into Mom's ally. When I asked to join their shopping trips, Jessica would exchange meaningful looks with Mom. "It's just boring grown-up stuff," she'd say, though she was barely 13. They developed inside jokes I wasn't part of, whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. Our home operated on a clear hierarchy, Mom at the top, Jessica as the chosen successor, and me perpetually relegated to the margins. Report card days showcased this dynamic perfectly. Jessica brought home straight A's to lavish praise and rewards. I brought home B's, with the occasional A in art or English subjects I loved only to hear. You could do better if you applied yourself like your sister. Never mind that I spent hours studying while Jessica seemed to absorb information effortlessly. In high school, the divide became a chasm. Jessica was class president, homecoming queen, valedictorian, the golden child in every measurable way. I found refuge in photography club and drama, creative outlets where I could express myself without comparison. "Why can't you be more like Jessica?" became the soundtrack of my adolescence. When Jessica was accepted to Harvard on partial scholarship, Mom threw a party. When I was accepted to NYU for photography, Mom asked how we'd afford it. "You should be practical like your sister," she said. "She's studying business, something that will provide security." Jessica had once dreamed of becoming a writer, but she'd abandoned that path to please our mother. I refused to abandon my passion, which only widened the rift between us. The summer before college, I made one last attempt to connect with Jessica. Over coffee at our local cafe, I glimpsed my childhood sister for a moment, laughing at my jokes, asking about my photography, but when her phone buzzed with Mom's text, the wall went back up. "Mom needs me," she said, gathering her things. She always would choose Mom over me. 6 years later, living in my Brooklyn studio apartment surrounded by my photography equipment, I'd built a life that celebrated what made me different. I'd limited contact with home to obligatory holiday calls and brief visits, each one reinforcing my decision to maintain distance. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday, my phone lit up with Jessica's name the first time she'd called, rather than texted in years. Allie. She used my childhood nickname, something she hadn't done since we were teens. "Jessica, is everything okay?" I immediately assumed bad news. "Everything's wonderful." Actually, her voice had a warmth I barely recognized. "I'm engaged." The announcement stunned me. Jessica had never mentioned a serious boyfriend during our sparse communications. "His name is James Sullivan. We've been dating for 2 years. 2 years of my sister's life I knew nothing about. I'd really love for you to be part of this. Allie," she continued, "we've grown apart, and that's partly my fault, but this feels like a chance to reconnect." Hope bloomed dangerously in my chest. "I'd like that. Actually, I have a favor to ask. We're having an engagement party next month. Would you be willing to photograph it? You're so talented, and it would mean so much to have my sister's touch on our celebration." Warning bells rang faintly, but I silenced them. This was my opening to repair our relationship. "Of course," I agreed. Over the next 18 months, Jessica called me frequently, always about wedding planning. She wanted my professional opinion on photographers. "I'd ask you to do it, but you should be a guest, not working. Videographers, lighting, and venues." Each conversation lasted exactly as long as she needed my expertise, then concluded abruptly when I attempted to discuss anything personal. "Which backdrop photographs better, for receptions, draped fabric, or flower walls?" she'd ask, then cut me off when I mentioned my recent gallery showing. "That's great, but I really need to decide on this before my call with the planner." Still, I clung to her promise of inclusion. I rearranged client meetings for her venue tours, researched vendors late into the night, and created detailed mood boards for her vision. I invested hours I would bill other clients thousands for, all under the guise of sisterly bonding. 6 months into planning, embossed invitations went out. Friends posted photos of theirs on social media, tagging Jessica and James. Mom called to discuss her outfit for the bridal shower, mentioning the invitation's gorgeous calligraphy. Mine never arrived. "Jessica, I haven't received my invitation," I mentioned during one of our calls, trying to sound casual. "Oh, the calligrapher must have missed you somehow. Don't worry about it. You're obviously invited." She quickly pivoted. "Speaking of which, What filter would you recommend for nighttime reception photos? 2 more weeks passed. No invitation arrived. The week before the wedding, I drove to Boston to help Mom with some last-minute preparations, or so I told myself. Really, I needed to understand what was happening, to find some concrete evidence of my place in this family narrative. While Mom was at the florist, I found myself alone in the house where I'd grown up, wandering into the living room. I noticed the family photo albums on the bookshelf, albums I hadn't looked at in years. I pulled down the one labeled Family Memories 1995 to 2010 and opened it on the coffee table. The first few pages showed normal family photos, vacations, birthdays, holidays. Dad was still in most of them, smiling and present. But as I flipped through the years, something began to feel wrong. By 2005, 3 years after Dad left, I started noticing the careful cropping. Photos that should have included me seemed oddly framed, cutting off just where I would have been standing. Then I found them the evidence I wasn't prepared for. At the back of the album were the original photos, uncut. Photo after photo showed the same pattern images that had been carefully edited to remove me. Birthday parties where I'd been cut out, leaving strange, empty spaces. Christmas mornings where I'd been cropped away, making it look like Jessica was an only child. But the worst was a photo from Jessica's high school graduation. The original showed all 4 of us, Mom, Dad, Jessica, and me. But the version that had been framed and displayed showed only 3 Mom, Jessica, and Dad. I had been entirely erased, as if I'd never existed. This wasn't just favoritism or emotional neglect. This was systematic erasure. My hands trembling. I took photos of the evidence with my phone. I finally understood that I hadn't just been excluded from the wedding. I'd been written out of our family story entirely. One photograph at a time. I sat in my Boston hotel room the night before Jessica's wedding, staring at the photos on my phone. The evidence was undeniable. My mother had spent years literally cutting me out of our family history. My phone rang. Taylor, my closest friend since college. "How are you feeling about tomorrow?" she asked. "Like I'm about to walk into a trap," I admitted. "But I need to see this through. I need to know exactly where I stand." "You don't owe them anything. Allie, you know that, right?" "I know. But I owe myself this. I need to stop living in the uncertainty." "Promise me you won't let them destroy you again." "I won't," I said, and meant it. I'm not the same person who left for college. I know my worth now. But even as I said it, part of me hoped I was wrong about everything. Part of me still wanted to belong to the family I was born into. The next afternoon, standing at that check-in table with my name mysteriously absent from the guest list, I felt the last of my illusions crumble. When Mom approached with that familiar look of irritation, I was ready. "Family only. Allison," she said when I pressed her about my exclusion, "real family, not strangers who only reappear when it's convenient." Strangers. I kept my voice level despite the rage building inside me. I'm her sister. Sisters don't abandon their family for years, then expect royal treatment. That's when Jessica appeared, not in her wedding gown, but in a silk robe, clearly pulled from her preparation suite. Her face showed irritation, not concern. "What's going on?" she demanded. "Mom, the makeup artist needs you back upstairs." "Your sister seems confused about her invitation status," Mom replied. Jessica looked at me with those familiar eyes, the same green as Mom's and mine, and I searched for any sign of the girl who had once held my hand under the kitchen table. "Allie, we talked about this," she said, her voice gentler than Mom's, but just as dismissive. "You helped with planning, and we appreciate that. But today is for family." "I am family," I whispered. Jessica's head tilted slightly. "Are you left, Allie? You built a whole life without us. You can't just show up in a pretty dress and claim family privileges when it suits you." The words hit harder than Mom's outright hostility because they came wrapped in Jessica's particular brand of reasonable cruelty. "I see," I said finally, a strange calm replacing the hurt. "Then I'll live like a stranger." I turned to walk away, but something made me stop. The photo album, the systematic erasure, the years of free consultation disguised as sisterly bonding. "Tell me something, Jessica," I called back. "When you told James's parents I wouldn't be attending, what reason did you give?" Jessica's face went pale. What do you mean? Did you tell them I was too busy, prior commitments? Or did you say I preferred staying behind the camera?" The guilty flush that spread across Jessica's neck told me everything. "You lied to them," I continued. "Just like you lied to me for 18 months. You used my expertise, my time, my hope for reconciliation, all while knowing you'd never intended to include me." James appeared then, confusion evident on his face. "Jessica, what's happening?" I looked at this man who seemed genuinely kind, who had no idea what kind of family he was marrying into. "Congratulations on your wedding, James," I said. "I hope you build something beautiful together, something based on honesty." I should have left then. Part of me wanted to preserve what little dignity remained, but as I watched guests stream past me, people who had no idea they were witnessing the culmination of a lifetime of exclusion, I realized I had one last choice to make. I could disappear quietly, letting their narrative stand unchallenged, or I could refuse to be erased one final time. The reception was in full swing when I slipped inside through a side entrance. Years of photographing weddings had taught me how to move unnoticed through crowds. I made my way to the edge of the ballroom, where I could see the head table clearly. There was no place set for me. Of course, no card bearing my name. I had been not just uninvited, but entirely unaccounted for. During a lull between toasts, I approached the microphone. "Hello, everyone," I said clearly, watching heads turn throughout the ballroom. At the head table, Jessica froze mid-conversation, and Mom's champagne glass halted halfway to her lips. "For those who don't know me, I'm Allison Crawford, Jessica's sister." A murmur rippled through the crowd. I saw James's parents exchange confused glances. "I wasn't planning to speak tonight," I continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "But I realized I haven't properly congratulated my sister and her new husband." Jessica's face had drained of color. Mom was half rising from her seat, probably planning to have me removed. "Family is complicated, isn't it?" I said to the room. "We don't choose the people we're born connected to. Sometimes those connections bring joy, sometimes pain, sometimes both." I looked directly at Jessica now. "My sister and I have had a complex relationship over the years, largely shaped by events beyond our control when we were children." The room had gone completely silent. What I've learned, watching Jessica today, is that family isn't always about blood or shared history. Sometimes it's about the people we choose to build our futures with. I raised an imaginary glass. "Jessica, I hope you found that with James. I hope you build something beautiful together, something based on mutual respect and honest communication." Mom was signaling to security now, but James put a restraining hand on her arm, his expression troubled. "I won't take up any more of your celebration." I concluded. I just wanted to acknowledge the truth of our family story, because we can't heal what we don't acknowledge. I set down the microphone and walked toward the exit, head high, ignoring the murmurs spreading through the crowd. I had nearly reached my car when I heard Jessica's voice, breathless as though she'd been running. "Allison, stop!" I turned slowly. She stood 20 feet away, wedding gown gathered in her hands to keep it from dragging, face flushed with emotion. "How could you?" she demanded. "At my wedding, in front of everyone. How could I tell the truth?" I asked calmly, After you and Mom spent months lying to me, using me for free professional advice, then having me turned away at the door like a stranger, you humiliated me in front of James's entire family, she hissed, advancing toward me. They're all in there wondering what kind of person excludes her own sister. What kind of person does? I countered. For a moment, we stared at each other across the parking lot, two women who shared DNA but had never really shared a life. You know what the saddest part is? I said finally. I would have been there for you, supported you, celebrated you, without conditions or keeping score. Because that's what family does. Real family. And what would you know about real family? Jessica shot back. You left, you moved to New York and barely came home. I left because staying meant continuing to accept that I was less valuable, less worthy of love and consideration, I explained. But I never stopped reaching out. Every birthday card, every Christmas visit, every phone call, those were all attempts to maintain connection despite the rejection. Jessica's anger seemed to deflate slightly. So this is all our fault. None of the responsibility is yours. I take responsibility for allowing myself to be treated as less than I deserve for so long, I acknowledged. For believing that if I just tried harder, achieved more, I would finally earn my place in your lives. Behind Jessica, I saw Mom approaching, her expression thunderous. Several guests had followed them outside, drawn by our confrontation. That's enough, Mom announced when she reached us. Allison, you've made your point. This is Jessica's day. Is it? I asked, looking between them. Or is it just another opportunity to erase me from the family narrative while still benefiting from my skills? I pulled out my phone and showed them the photos I'd taken from the album. These are from your collection, Mom. The original photos, and the edited versions where I've been cut out. Years of systematic erasure. This isn't about me being dramatic or sensitive. It's about you literally trying to erase me from our family history. The silence stretched long enough for James to appear, his face grave. Is this true? He asked Jessica quietly. Did you deliberately exclude Allison while using her professional services? Jessica looked trapped between her husband's evident disappointment and Mom's expectation of loyalty. It's complicated, she hedged. It's really not, I said. But it doesn't matter anymore. I understand now that I can't earn a place in a family that decided long ago I didn't deserve one. I looked at James, who seemed like a genuinely good man caught in an impossible situation. Take care of each other, I said, and maybe think carefully about the patterns you want to pass on to your children. The weeks following the wedding were harder than I'd expected. I thought I'd feel liberated after finally speaking my truth. But instead, I felt hollowed out, like I'd lost something essential, even though I'd never really had it to begin with. Word of the wedding confrontation spread through my professional network. Some clients were supportive, but I lost 2 bookings brides who worried that their photographer's family drama might somehow taint their perfect day. I spent most of July in my apartment, declining social invitations and letting calls go to voicemail. Taylor finally staged an intervention, showing up with takeout and refusing to leave. You're spiraling, she said bluntly. And I get it, what they did was awful. But you can't let them take your life away from you twice. She was right. By isolating myself, I was letting Mom and Jessica's rejection define me all over again. I think I need help, I admitted. Real help. Not just friends telling me I'm better off without them. That's the first smart thing you've said in weeks, Taylor replied, already Googling therapists on her phone. Doctor. Sarah Chen's office was nothing like I'd expected, warm and comfortable, with actual books instead of intimidating diplomas covering the walls. Tell me about your family, she said during our first session. I don't have one, I replied automatically. That's interesting, she said. Most people would say they have a complicated relationship with their family, or that they're estranged, but you said you don't have one at all. Over the following weeks, Dr. Chen helped me understand concepts I'd never had words for: emotional neglect, scapegoating, the golden child syndrome. I learned that what had happened to me wasn't unique, that there were patterns and names for the dynamics that had shaped my childhood. You're not responsible for other people's inability to love you properly, she reminded me often. Gradually, I began to believe it. 3 months after the wedding, I received an unexpected email from James. The subject line simply read, "Checking in." Allison, I hope this message finds you well. Things have been complicated since the wedding. Jessica and I are in counseling, trying to work through some difficult truths that came to light that night and in the weeks that followed. I want you to know that I've encouraged Jessica to examine the family patterns that led to your exclusion. She's resistant, but not entirely closed to the process. Her relationship with Diana has become strained as Diana continues to refuse any accountability. I don't know if reconciliation between you and Jessica is possible or even desirable from your perspective, but I thought you should know that your words had impact. Some seeds take longer to germinate than others. Take care. James. I appreciated his reaching out, but I felt no pressure to respond immediately. My healing journey wasn't contingent on Jessica's recognition or Mom's accountability. I had stopped making my peace dependent on their actions. 6 months later, another email arrived, this time from Jessica herself. "Allie, I've been thinking about what you said at the wedding, about Mom making me the favorite after Dad left. I always saw it as closeness, not favoritism. But therapy is making me question a lot of things I thought I knew about our family. I'm pregnant, due in March. And for the first time, I'm thinking about what kind of mother I want to be, what patterns I want to break or continue. I'm not ready to talk yet, and maybe you're not either. I just wanted you to know I'm thinking about these things. Jessica." I read the email 3 times before responding briefly. "Congratulations on your pregnancy. I'm glad you're doing the work to understand our family patterns. I hope your child knows they're unconditionally loved." It was more self-reflection than Jessica had ever demonstrated previously. I sent a kind but non-committal response, keeping the door neither flung open nor firmly shut. As my personal healing progressed, my professional life flourished in unexpected ways. I expanded beyond wedding photography into documentary work, capturing human connections in various contexts, multi-generational family gatherings, community celebrations, chosen family structures. A gallery owner who had seen my work invited me to create an exhibition called Chosen Family, featuring images of bonds created by choice rather than biology. The show opened on a crisp October evening, my studio packed with friends, colleagues, and clients who had become so much more than professional contacts. These people: Taylor, my mentor Martin, my yoga instructor Zoe, the young couple whose elopement had turned into a years-long friendship. They were my real family. During the opening, I stood before the central installation, a triptych showing 3 different family structures: traditional, blended, and chosen. Each image told a story of love and connection, but only the chosen family photo radiated the kind of unconditional acceptance I'd spent my life seeking. "Look at you," Taylor said, linking her arm through mine. "Creating beauty from pain. That's alchemy, my friend." "It's healing," I corrected gently, "for me and hopefully for others who see themselves in these images." I was editing photos from a winter wedding when Jessica's text arrived. "Emma Rose Sullivan, born February 28th, 7 Celebs 300, healthy and perfect. Would you like to meet her?" I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to maintain the boundaries I'd worked so hard to establish. But another part, the part that had always wanted to be someone's aunt, was curious. "I'd like that," I replied. When works for you, the meeting took place at a neutral location, a cafe halfway between Jessica's suburban home and downtown Boston. Jessica looked tired but radiant, baby Emma sleeping peacefully in her carrier. "Thank you for coming," Jessica said as I sat down across from them. "Thank you for asking," I replied, meaning it. We talked carefully around the larger issues, focusing instead on safe topics: Emma's sleep schedule, Jessica's recovery, James's paternity leave. But when Emma woke up and Jessica offered to let me hold her, something shifted. Looking down at my niece, this tiny person who carried half my DNA but owed me nothing, I felt a fierce protectiveness that surprised me. "She's beautiful," I said, and meant it completely. "I want to do better," Jessica said quietly, "with her than what we grew up with." "That's all any of us can do," I replied. "Break the cycles we can recognize." We didn't hug goodbye, didn't make promises about regular visits or sudden sisterhood, but when Jessica asked if she could send me updates about Emma's milestones, I said yes. "I'm not asking you to forgive us," she said as we gathered our coats. "I'm not sure I've earned that, but maybe we can figure out what a relationship looks like between who we are now instead of who we were trained to be as kids." It was the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. "Maybe," I agreed, "but it has to be real. Jessica, no using me for free advice, no expecting me to accept less than basic respect. If we're going to build something, it has to be built on truth." She nodded. "I understand." 6 months later, I'm editing photos from Emma's christening photos Jessica asked me to take. As a guest who happens to be a photographer, not as free labor disguised as family involvement, Mom was politely distant at the event, acknowledging my presence without warmth but also without hostility. We may never have the relationship I once craved, and I've made peace with that. Not every wound can be healed, not every relationship can be repaired. But Jessica and I are building something new, cautious, boundaried, but genuine. We text about Emma's developments, share photos, meet for coffee every few months. It's not the sisterhood I dreamed of as a child, but it's honest, and that makes it more valuable than any fantasy. The greatest lesson I've learned is that belonging isn't something we earn through achievement or conformity. True belonging comes from being fully seen and accepted for who we authentically are. I found that with my chosen family in New York, long before I glimpsed it in Boston. My photography business has expanded into workshops on family dynamics and healing, helping other people document their own chosen families. There's something powerful about capturing moments of genuine connection, especially for those of us who had to create love rather than inherit it. Sometimes clients ask if I regret speaking up at Jessica's wedding, if I wish I'd handled things differently. I tell them the truth. I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret doing it. That night, I stopped trying to fit into a space that was never meant for me and started creating space for myself. Emma is crawling now, pulling herself up on coffee tables and babbling in the universal language of babies who expect to be understood. When she looks at me, she sees Aunt Allie, not the family disappointment, not the excluded sister, just someone who loves her unconditionally. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's everything. The journey from exclusion to belonging isn't linear. There are still days when old insecurities resurface, when I catch myself seeking validation in unhealthy ways. But those days grow fewer as I continue to choose people who choose me back, as I build a life that celebrates rather than apologizes for who I am. If there's one thing I could tell anyone who recognizes their own story in mine, it's this: your worth isn't determined by those who couldn't see it. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves is to stop trying to belong where we were never meant to fit, and instead create spaces where we and others can belong without condition or compromise. The family we're born into shapes us, but it doesn't have to define us. Real family, the kind that matters, is the people who show up consistently, who celebrate our successes without jealousy, who hold space for our failures without judgment. I found mine, and someday, when Emma is old enough to understand, I'll tell her that love is not conditional, that family is not a competition, and that she will always have a place at my table. 3 years have passed since that wedding reception where I was turned away at the door. Today, I'm photographing another wedding, but this time, it's different. This time, I'm documenting the marriage of two people who both understand what it means to build family from scratch. The bride was raised in foster care. The groom was disowned by his religious parents when he came out. Their wedding party isn't filled with childhood friends or blood relatives, but with the people who chose to love them unconditionally, former foster siblings, chosen mentors, friends who became family when biology failed them. As I capture their first dance, I think about the journey that brought me here, not just as their photographer, but as someone who finally understands that the most profound love often comes from the most unexpected places. Last month, Emma took her first steps straight into my arms during one of our monthly visits. Jessica and I still aren't the sisters we might have been if our childhood had been different. But we're something perhaps more valuable. Two adults who chose to build a relationship based on who we are now, not who we were trained to be. Mom remains unchanged, still convinced that her version of our family story is the only truth that matters. I've stopped expecting her to evolve, and in that acceptance, I've found an unexpected peace. Some people are incapable of the kind of love we need from them, and that's their limitation, not our failure. But here's what I've learned. The space that rejection creates in our lives doesn't have to remain empty. We can fill it with people who see us, celebrate us, challenge us to grow, and choose us every single day. We can become the family member we always needed for someone else who's still searching. My chosen family gathered last week for our monthly dinner, Taylor bringing her terrible cooking and wonderful humor, Martin sharing stories from his latest photography expedition, Zoe leading us through gratitude practices that actually make sense. As we sat around my Brooklyn apartment, laughing until our sides hurt, I realized this was what belonging actually feels like. Not the desperate clawing for acceptance I'd known growing up, but the quiet certainty that these people would show up for me, just as I would for them. Not because we had to, but because we wanted to. If you're reading this and recognizing pieces of your own story, know this: your worth was never determined by those who couldn't see it. Your value doesn't decrease because someone else couldn't appreciate it. And the family that matters isn't always the one you're born into. Sometimes it's the one you create. The most radical thing you can do is refuse to shrink yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant for you. Instead, become the person who creates space for others. Build the table where everyone belongs. Be the family member you needed when you were young and searching. Because here's the truth: they don't tell you about healing. It's not just about fixing what was broken in you. It's about becoming whole enough to offer shelter to others who are still caught in the storm. Emma will grow up knowing she's unconditionally loved. She'll see what healthy boundaries look like, what chosen family means, what it feels like to be celebrated rather than tolerated. She'll never have to earn her place at our table because it will always be set and waiting for her. And maybe that's how we change the world, one child at a time, one chosen family at a time, one moment of radical acceptance at a time. The vendor. They called me, as if love could be purchased, as if belonging were a service to be contracted. But I know better now. Love isn't something you buy or earn or perform your way into. Real love, the kind that changes lives and heals generations, that's something you choose to give and receive freely. And in the end, that choice makes all the difference. Thank you for reading The Vendor. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear about your own journey to finding your chosen family. Because every story of healing matters, and every person who breaks the cycle creates space for others to be free. What family means to you? Share your story in the comments below. Your courage might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.